The most recent inflation report was just released on Tuesday, and there's already a ton of overhyped videos on the subject. So what I want to do in this video is just give you the facts without the bullshit, so you know exactly what's going on and exactly what it means for you and the economy. So let's do just that. As always, my name is Derek, and I got my degree in finance, so you don't have to. Let's go over the data. First and foremost, the big ticket item, which is headline inflation or CPI inflation. That is improving, down from 3.7% year over year last month to 3.2% year over year this month. That is, however, still much higher than the Federal Reserve's target rate of 2%, and core inflation is the same story. It is down from 4.1% year over year last month to 4.0% year over year this month. But because those two numbers still remain well above the Federal Reserve's target rate of 2%, we are most likely going to remain in a high interest rate environment for much longer, most likely well into 2024, if not into 2025. I guess it just depends on what you consider high interest rate environment. There is an expectation that the federal funds rate will not drop below 4% until the end of 2024. So that should put your perspectives and your guidance in line. Okay, now government debt, also known as treasury bonds, the yield on this did come down. And the reason for that is because the market is expecting that this might just mean that the Federal Reserve is done raising rates. But even if they are done raising rates, again, it does not mean that tomorrow we're going to go into a low interest rate environment. It means that they're going to hold rates here at 5.5% for probably a significant amount of time, most likely 6 to 7 months. The general consensus is that they will finally start cutting rates Q2 to Q3 of 2024. And to me, that sounds reasonable because it holds interest rates high long enough to really put downward pressure on inflation. Now I want to go over some of the individual items, and more importantly, I want to know your thoughts on this because what the data says might not actually reflect what you or I are feeling. So first and foremost, energy prices are mostly down on a year-to-year basis, except for electricity. Now this does make sense because there's this huge push to go electric on everything. And when there's more demand and same or less supply, you get increased prices. But what's interesting is that the rest of energy prices are down. You let me know if that is what you felt in your own life. Now let's go over food. Now food is up 3.3% on a year-to-year basis, and we'll go over the individual items. So the big ticket items that are down are eggs, butter, and fish, all down year over year. You let me know if in your life, when you go to the grocery store, if these items feel more expensive or less expensive than a year ago, because what the data says might not necessarily reflect what most people are feeling. Just remember, inflation numbers are usually a basket and they're usually averages, so what you feel might be very different. And I'm very curious to hear that because when I go to the grocery store, most things still feel significantly more expensive. And this does line up with meat and bread. Another two big ticket items that a lot of people eat. These are up year over year. With that said, the next big ticket item that we need to talk about is the cost of shelter or the cost of housing. That is better than last month from above 7% down to a 6.7% increase year over year. With that said, that again might not be what you feel in your day-to-day life, because if you've tried to buy a house or rent a house currently, it probably feels like a lot more expensive than 6.7% as opposed to last year. And that is because mortgages are extremely high at 8% plus, and that puts a much higher cost on a monthly basis to shelter or housing costs. Okay, now the main one really, or the one that the Federal Reserve is going to look at, that is services. And that is because this economy is a service-based economy. We're not necessarily a labor-based economy. We are a service-based economy. And as such, service inflation directly tells the Federal Reserve how the general economy is doing in regards to jobs. So it is an improvement from 5.7% year over year, last report, to 5.5% year over year, this report. That is still significantly higher, and it is more than double the federal target rate of 2% on the dot. So what does that mean? That means that the job market and wages are still extremely strong, at least according to the data, which means, again, in my opinion, even if the Federal Reserve is done raising rates, where I think, honestly, I think that both Jerome Powell and one of the governors, Michelle Bowman, they've both hinted to, look, they're not ready to cut rates anytime soon. And in reality, the question is more, have we raised rates enough? So in my opinion, there is still a real possibility that they raise rates 0.25%. With that said, that possibility, in my opinion, is greatly diminished by this report, and we will have to see where they go in their December meeting. Remember, they have a December meeting. They have one more meeting before the end of the year, and that is in December. So inflation in general is still much higher than what the Federal Reserve wants, which is 2%. And services definitely proves that point. With that said, let's go over some consumer expectations, because consumer expectations kind of paint the picture as to why we might not be in a technical recession, but it sure does feel that way to the average consumer. So, for example, the consumer expectations is that income will increase 3.1% over the next 12 months. That sounds great. Any increase in income is great. If you make $100,000, next year you might make $103,000. The problem is when you look at the expectations for expenses. Expenses are expected to increase 5.3% over the next 12 months. So once again, when you're in a scenario where expenses outpace wage growth, the American public is going to feel poorer, not richer, and the standard of living is going to come down as the cost of living increases and outpaces wages. So even though we might not be in a technical recession, and even though the GDP growth for this country is very much in the positive, 4% plus, it still feels like a recessionary environment for the average American, because still to this day, 2.5 years into the fight against inflation, inflation is still outpacing wage growth. And that is going to make everyone feel poorer until that situation changes. And until, on top of all that, interest rates come down, because borrowing is also more expensive because interest rates are high. So all in all, the standard of living is probably lowering. People are probably still continuing to feel poorer, and that is because cost of living is increasing and wages are increasing less. So I hope this video was informative. Those are the facts of this most recent report, and we will have to see how the Federal Reserve takes these facts into account during their next meeting. Of course, at the moment, it looks less and less likely that the Federal Reserve will raise interest rates in December, and it looks more and more likely, not 100%, but more and more likely that they are done raising rates. So we'll have to see what happens. This is the most recent report. I hope you just enjoyed just the facts without all the BS, because there's plenty of videos that over sensationalize this stuff. I don't want to do that here. If you like personal finance, if you like just the facts, if you like world economics broken down in simple terms, then you are in the right place. And I hope to see you in the next video. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already. This is a relatively new YouTube channel, and it is something that I'm very passionate about. And if you haven't yet, please turn on the bell notification so you don't miss the next video. Usually videos are on Tuesdays, but when something like this important needs to be talked about, I'll do a video on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. But the main content is usually on Tuesdays, and that is when you can expect it. Other than that, I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.